Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at IronHack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast, and we are here today with Tisha. But Tisha, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Let's do this because we have with us today Tisha Richmond, who is a district student engagement and professional development specialist and Canvas coordinator. She's a national speaker and author from Southern Oregon, and she has taught family and consumer science for 25 years and served in various leadership roles in her school and district, as well as an Oregon regional and state edtech cadres. She is the author of the book Make Learning Magical, which unlocks 7 keys to transform teaching and create unforgettable experiences in the classroom. And she speaks nationally in the US on a variety of topics related to teaching and learning in all content and grade levels, and hosts the Make Learning Magical podcast as well. Tisha, is there anything we're missing? Any terrible pronunciation on my side on your name or anything else?
No, it was all great. My name is pronounced Tisha, but you can call me just about anything and I'll answer to it.
Tisha, is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic. So today we are going to be talking about many things, but the first thing we want to get to know, Tisha, is about you. Like, what does a day look like for you? Like, I don't know, what does it being with you feel like in a day like today, yesterday, last week, or whatever you want to go for?
Well, I serve a district of about 20 schools, K through 12. And in my district role, I support teachers in just bringing in innovative ideas, educational technology to really help make learning magical. That is my passion. That's my joy. And gamification is absolutely a huge part of that journey. And so anytime that I can work with teachers to help them tap into strategies and different types of pedagogy to get students excited about learning, that is what I absolutely love to do. We also brought on Canvas Learning Management System this past year. And so that is also kind of another role that I play, is helping our teachers navigate the learning management system and, bring their amazing learning to that platform as well.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like you're into many exciting things. And as we read on your intro, gamification and magic are some of those. So let's get into some of the magic, because one of the things that we like to discuss always is, you learn from the good, but you also learn from those times where things didn't go so good, didn't go so well. Or what I like to call the fail or first attempts in learning. I coined that from Ann Coppins in a conference. What would that time look like? One of those failures, one of those times where, it didn't go well. We want to be there with you, live that experience, and of course, take a few lessons from that.
Sure. Well, I think about, back at the beginning of my journey into gamification, I really had come to a point in my educational career that I was I lost some of the joy and the excitement about learning. And I felt that even though I had been, teaching at that point for 17 years and I had things dialed in, I felt like I had my lessons down. I wasn't really excited about teaching anymore. And I was feeling like a failure as an educator because I felt like my students had lost some of that, that engagement, excitement. And I think mainly because I had lost that excitement and I needed to find new ways to reach my learners. And so that is when I decided to start gamifying and really change up the way things looked in my classroom. And when I started to approach learning from the gamified perspective, then I found that my students were not only becoming more engaged, but they were becoming empowered learners as well. They were owning their learning. They were being more creative. They were being more collaborative. We had more of a a unified and positive classroom culture. And so, that is, looking at it from the big lens, I think that that's, where I was feeling as a failure as a teacher and how gamification really changed my journey. And then I think that there's so many, I've had so many fails, so many things that haven't gone right throughout my teaching career. But I can think of one situation. My son was in my classroom. I taught culinary arts for quite a long time. And he was in my class as a sophomore, I believe. And there was a day where I had this lesson planned and the Wi-Fi went out in our school. And all of a sudden, this lesson that I had, meticulously put together and I thought was going to be amazing, all of a sudden wasn't going to work. And I looked at my son and you could just see in his face horror, like, Mom, how are you going to fix this? What are you going to do? And I saw a board game that I'd had on my countertop that I had bought at a store locally, and I hadn't used it in my classroom yet. And I decided in that moment that we were going to have a game challenge, just like on the fly. And we took this game and I had my students work on teams to create their own version of this game using the content that we were learning about. And so it was such a fun, spontaneous moment that could have gone really, really wrong, but it actually ended up being a really great experience for me as a teacher and for my students. And so that was one of those situations that could have definitely been a fail, but I was able to turn it around for the sake of my son.
There you go. The sake of your son and definitely all your students. I'm sure they enjoyed that class as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But that look of your son, I'm sure, was a big part of the push.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds very interesting. And one thing I can see from like both experiences, your sort of willingness to adapt and to do different things. Is there an experience or something that you attribute that to, or have you always been so amazing?
Oh, goodness. Well, I don't know that I'm amazing, but I definitely can go back to that year that I was talking about where I really had lost my joy for teaching and learning. And it was that year that I brought a set of iPads into my classroom. And at that point, our school was not one-to-one devices. No one had a classroom set of Chromebooks or iPads in their classroom. And so I had this opportunity to bring them in because of a grant that I had been awarded. And so I really started searching for ways to use these devices in powerful ways. I really had no idea what that looked like for classroom learning. And so I went to my first conference on educational technology, and my mind was just kind of blown. I couldn't believe all of the possibilities that were out there that I hadn't tapped into. And I realized I had been living in kind of this educational silo and really hadn't been exposed to a lot of ideas and pedagogy and education that was out there. And so I started getting connected on Twitter, which was a huge part of my journey, was just finding educators in other parts of the world that were doing amazing things, and then taking those things and deciding, how I was going to adapt them and bring them into my classroom. And then I began sharing some of the things that I was doing in hopes that maybe I could give back and help others. And so it just became this journey of stepping out of my comfort zone, trying new things, getting connected to educators around the world that were doing things that were different, that I thought was amazing. And I wanted to try to figure out ways to do that too. And then really being iterative and knowing that as a culinary arts teacher, an idea that was shared for an English classroom may not translate exactly to my classroom, but how could I make it my own? How could I take that idea and change it and make it powerful in my own classroom? And I have found that when you step out of your comfort zone, every step you take makes you more courageous and gets you more excited to try that new thing. And like I mentioned before, I have had lots of failures. It didn't mean that everything that I stepped out of my comfort zone to try was a success, but I learned from that experience and was able to pick myself up and figure out either how to iterate to make it better, or I decided, you know what, that's not the route for me. And I went another route. And it's been a process, but in an absolutely incredible journey. And I am so grateful for the educators that have connected with me over the years and really helped me on this journey of rediscovering my joy and passion for education.
Wow, sounds very, very inspirational as well. So thank you for that story, Tisha. And taking it like all the way in the other direction, can you tell us of a time of something that, some, game plan that you did or something of the sort, and it actually worked, it went the way you wanted it to? We want to be there in that success with you, see, how it felt, of course, and maybe what lessons, maybe what you would attribute that success to, or some of it.
Right. So, what I did in my classroom was I reworked my entire curriculum around a gamified theme. And really that gamified theme in my culinary arts class always revolved around inspiration from a reality television game show. And so I don't know if you're familiar with reality television game shows like The Amazing Race or Master Chef or The Great Food Truck Race. Those were shows that I watched on television. And as I was watching these shows, I thought, wow, I wonder if I could take this idea, this theme, this storyline, and layer it over my curriculum and then bring in some of the action and game mechanics that are involved in these shows and bring it into each unit that I teach in my classroom. And that really became a complete game changer in my classroom. Like, it really was super impactful to see how I could take this curriculum that I had been teaching for quite some time, but really had kind of lost its life. I wasn't really trying anything new. I wasn't really finding my students were very engaged. And all of a sudden, as I layered this gamified storyline and game mechanics into my classroom, the classroom really came alive. And all of a sudden, my students were really immersed in the learning and the content, and again, became very empowered as learners. And so for me, that was a huge shift in the way that I taught that was just an amazing success. And I think in that, I have found that I just have a passion for it. I have a passion for taking inspiration from different types of reality game shows, but also games that are in my game cabinet at home, and finding ways to bring that into learning. And it's just so much fun. And I've had the opportunity to see teachers across the educational spectrum, from kindergarten teachers, of littles to all the way through higher ed, take these concepts and be able to transfer it to their classrooms as well with great success. And so that has been so powerful to see that, and to see teachers really finding their joy, because teaching's hard. And right now, especially in the last couple of years, it's been very, very challenging. And so I think teachers that have been able to really find ways to engage and empower their students and find joy for themselves in the journey, it's been transformational.
Sounds absolutely amazing. And a very quick follow-up. Were you always like into games or those game shows, or is it something like you had seen it a few times and that's it? Or were you like a gamer per se?
Well, I always have loved games. Yes. As a kid, I have so many memories of sitting around the coffee table at my grandma's house playing games with my cousins and playing card games with my dad. I remember being on a road trip across the United States with my dad in kindergarten. I was only 5 years old, and I remember learning how to play cribbage with him as we were driving, and probably not the safest thing to do now that I think about it. But
Different times. Yeah,
exactly. But there was so many times growing up that I loved playing games. And then, back then there weren't reality game shows much, but there were definitely TV game shows like The Price is Right and $25,000 Pyramid were games here in the US that I loved to watch as a child on television. And so those definitely, I think, shaped my journey and my interest in games as an adult, for sure. So yes, I've always loved games, not as much video games, but I've always loved card games, board games, game shows on television.
That sounds fantastic, because you're able to draw inspiration from those. And again, when gamification started coming around, and it still happens, many people just relate it to video games. And, I'm not a video gamer. And it's like, well, there's many types of games. many things you can try, and many things you've already done for sure. Everybody has played games every now and then and hopefully enjoyed them as well at some point. So there's a lot of inspiration to draw from many, many different places when going into gamification. And talking about that inspiration, when you're maybe teaching it to somebody else, or if you were faced in a situation where you wanted to do some gamification, do you have, some process, some way of doing things? How do you, what do you follow? What are the steps maybe that you do, or how does it go?
Sure. Well, I first of all tell people to find inspiration, draw inspiration from something that they love. So if that's maybe games that they play with their family and their game cabinet at home or their game shelf, start looking there, start thinking about the games that you love and start playing those games through an educator's lens and thinking about how those games can translate to learning, because there's a lot of games that I have played with my family. And as I'm playing it, I think, oh, this would be a great game to bring into the classroom. And I start thinking about the ways the game could be morphed or changed to bring into learning. And so I think that's one piece is really drawing from that inspiration, the things that you love, and thinking about how that could translate to learning. Same thing with television shows that have some type of gamified element, like reality game shows that you watch those shows through an educator's lens and think about how those shows could translate to learning in the classroom. And then what I always tell people is to really think about, if you are going to do a gamified approach where you're layering this gamification over an entire unit or an entire semester, think about, what is the storyline in that? How could you create a storyline that would layer over your curriculum? So for instance, in my class, I had a storyline called The Amazing Race, and my students were traveling across the world, learning about different cultures, different cuisine, and my students became contestants in the game. And they were traveling from continent to continent in The Amazing Race. And then I would bring in a lot of action. So the different types of challenges that were present in the actual television game show, I would bring in those same kind of challenges into my classroom. But of course, they would look very different. They would be content related challenges. And so thinking about, again, drawing your inspiration, think about what the storyline is, who are your characters, what's the action, what's the setting, and what's the overall theme. Think about what is the goal of this game? What are you wanting your students to achieve as they're playing this game? And then really thinking about the action. What action is in this gamified structure? Are there going to be challenges? Are they going to be collaborative challenges? Are they going to be independent challenges? Are students going to level up? Are there going to be Easter eggs hidden that students can find throughout the game? Are there going to be any challenges where you're bringing in an authentic audience? Maybe you're going on a Zoom call and you're going to bring in experts from different parts of the United States. Maybe you're going to bring experts into your own classroom as judges for a challenge, thinking about those kinds of things as well. And so on my website, TishaRichmond.com, if you look under gamified experiences, I have a number of frameworks that I've used as a structure for different types of gamified plans in classrooms that you can kind of look at as a possible structure for bringing that concept into your own classroom.
That sounds fabulous. Thank you very much for pointing that out so that people can even go ahead and find some more.
Sure.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification.
And Tisha, what is something that you would say is maybe sort of a best practice? Not necessarily a golden or a silver bullet, but something that maybe, would make your project a little bit better, your gamified class a little bit better, or a lot better? Like, what would be something that typically works?
I think one of the most important things is you really create a safe and positive classroom culture, because that makes a huge difference in how your classroom dynamics work and how your gamified plan works. And so I spend the first couple weeks of class really getting to know my students, creating opportunities where students get to know each other, a lot of team-based challenges where I mix up groups every day. And so they're with different students, and really helping create this classroom culture where students feel safe to take risks and try new things. What they experience in my classroom might be different than what they experience in other classrooms as far as how they learn. And so I want students to feel safe in that space and know that we're all in this together. We are a community of learners that support and encourage each other. And when we fail, we are right there to help pick you right back up and help you on your learning journey. And so I very much believe in taking the time in those beginning days of class to really create a culture where students can learn and grow.
That sounds fantastic. It's great because that is so important to let students know that they have a space there that is, in many ways a safe space where they can just, learn and learn new things and be able to do new stuff, especially the younger you get, I could say the more spontaneous in many ways. And then you start losing that because, of all the risks of, the grades and all these things that we get some sort of pressure around. And we kind of forget that the classroom is that safe space in many ways.
So true.
So Tisha, what would you like to say is somebody, hearing these questions after, going through some of them, is there somebody that comes to your mind, somebody that you would like to listen in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Yes, I would highly recommend Michael Matera. He was really my inspiration for getting started in gamification. He wrote the book Explore Like a Pirate. And really, that was my beginning of truly understanding what gamification is all about and really thinking about how I was going to gamify my own classroom. And so I definitely think that he is someone that he's very inspirational and be a wonderful person to have on your show. And I, again, highly recommend his book, Explore Like a Pirate, which is a great book to explain gamification and why it's so powerful in learning.
Beautiful. In fact, he was episode 155. We had him twice, one for the Hive, his Hive Summit he does every year. We had him once to talk about that, and we had him once as well. So you probably want to go back and listen to Michael there. Fantastic episode. Michael is absolutely fantastic. I completely recommend him just as well. And talking about recommendations, you already mentioned Michael's book. I don't know if that's what you want to go for, or any other book as well that you would like to mention. Again, your choice, to recommend to this audience, to the engagers. Again, a group interested in maybe gamifying their classroom or gamifying some sort of experience.
Sure. I'd also shout out John Meehan, who wrote the book Adrenaline Rush, another excellent book on finding ways to gamify learning. And they are awesome. They've gone on to some adventures together with their online platforms. So yeah, definitely recommend both of them.
That sounds fantastic, John. Absolutely great character. And together it seems they're doing fantastic stuff. I'm getting their emails as well, and that's pretty interesting. I'd highly recommend getting into that. It's EMC Square, I think, right?
Yes.
There you go. And talking about recommendations, in this case, more than recommendations, I would ask you to tell us, what would you say is your superpower? That thing that you do at least better than most other people out there.
I really love taking a game or taking a reality game show, like I explained, and really remixing it and remaking it for education. That's something that I absolutely love to do. I was at a local store recently and I saw the game in the game shelves, Plinko. I don't know if you're familiar with The Price is Right, that game where you drop the little coin at the top of the board and it kind of falls down, and there's this element of chance on which dollar amount this coin is going to fall into. And so I love finding games like that. So I bought it on the spot and brought it home, and I'm developing ways to bring that into classroom learning. But I love doing that. I love taking something that wasn't made for education and finding a way to make it powerful for learning.
Sounds very, very exciting and very useful as well in this world of gamification. So talk about gamification and all that inspiration. What would you say is your favorite game?
I have so many games. I was thinking about this question, and as I was thinking about it, I was looking at my game cabinet. I have a whole closet that's only games. So many games. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how I have different games that I like to play with different people and that kind of fit different moods, right? So if I just want to laugh and bond as a family, I might play a game that just makes, me laugh. And if I want to play a game with my dad, I'm going to go for a card game because we love playing card games together. And so I don't know that I could name just one as a card game. I love progressive rummy. That's a fun one. I love hearts. I love the game Azul. That's one I love to play with my daughter, and Catan. Goodness, there's just so many. Rummy Cube is kind of one of those classics that I played as a kid that I love playing as an adult too. So it's really hard for me to pinpoint a favorite.
It's always a very difficult question for most guests. And, you mentioned quite a few, so I'm not going to push you anymore. Not this time, at least. Maybe if we talk again, I'll try to sneak out a little bit more of information. That sounds fantastic. So Tisha, when we have some more time, and I think we have a few more minutes like today, I always like to bring in one of those random questions from the audience. Well, random and of course curated, certainly. And this is a question that came from Johan de Bruin. He has a company apparently called Erudis Games. And he says, this could be interesting, especially to you, I think. Like, how can we match our educational curriculum with the different standards across countries? So I'm guessing that he's creating educational content in games. But of course, the US, and even within the US, there might be different standards. I don't know about that. But I do know that in different countries, there's different things. So how would you approach that problem?
So I think, first of all, just opening up those conversations with people from around the world and those different standards, I think that's something that's been really powerful in my journey, is just making those connections with other teachers and, from people from across the world, and really understanding their perspective and where they're coming from and what standards they do teach. And so I think that would be a starting point. It would be really great to bring people together, educators together, in a format where we could just talk about what we teach and really try to come up with those standards that, that could bring us all together and to be able to teach to. Does that answer your question? Yeah,
I think it's a great answer. In fact, it's kind of a theme as well. You were mentioning before the connection between different teachers and in different places. And I think that part of connection, even if it's a company, and sometimes companies are talking about scaling and all of this, sometimes you also have to do things that don't scale. You have to talk to a few people, one-on-one, understand where they're at, and start seeing if you can thread some common ideas. And of course, unless you're going to translate it to every single language, probably not going to sell it in every single country in the world, at least for the moment. So it could be a good idea to start approaching other people that might use it if you're doing it in English, for example. Other countries that use English, if you're in the US, maybe go to the UK, maybe see something, in South Africa, in New Zealand, in Australia. I don't know. That could be a great idea, and start connecting with those people, because not only are you going to get some standards, I'm sure you're going to gather a lot of inspiration and a lot of insights of what they're doing and what they're expecting as well, as far as at least the topic that you're discussing. So I think that is a fantastic answer. Thank you very much, Tisha, for that one.
Awesome. You're welcome.
So Tisha, do you have anything else you want to leave the engagers with? Any maybe final piece of advice? I don't know. Before you give us as well your, location in the sense of the internet, like where can we find out more about you? You already mentioned one of your resources. I don't know if you want to go for more.
Sure. I would just say that, have fun teaching and learning. I think when I started realizing that I could bring fun and engaging ideas into classroom learning and create an atmosphere where students really were excited and, again, empowered, it changed the landscape of learning in my classroom. And so I know that learning through play has been powerful in my own life. I've learned so much from it. And I think it's really important that we provide those experiences where students can play in our classroom too, because it makes learning sticky. They're going to remember the content and become more immersed in the content when we can frame learning in that way.
Sounds great. So thank you very much. And where can we find out more about your fantastic work?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at Tish Rich, TISHRICH, on Instagram at Make Learning Magical. You can also find my resources and many blog posts on TishaRichmond.com. And I have a podcast called the Make Learning Magical podcast that you can find on a variety of podcast platforms. We are going to be starting season 3 very soon in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm really excited about that. So you can listen to a lot of amazing conversations with incredible guests from around the world on that podcast as well.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very, very exciting, very appropriate as well for this audience of podcast listeners. So thanks again very much, Tisha, for taking some time off your schedule. Thank you very much for all those insights, all that experience that you've had with gamification and so much more. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this interview with Tisha. And I know if you would like to have any questions to bring up on the air and ask them to future guests, if you do, please go ahead and go to professorgame.com/question and ask your question. If it is selected, it'll come up in a future episode and you will get your direct answer. And before you go on to your next mission, before you click continue, remember to subscribe or follow for free using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.